In this video, we're going to talk about the different types of observational studies. And you can see I have 3 listed here. You can obviously read this on your own. No notes or anything to take down, but I will discuss them and talk about some of the pros and cons of each. So the first one we have is a cross-sectional study. A cross-sectional study, typically all of the data is collected at a single time point and is related to that particular time point. These are very useful when you're trying to see, in terms of the population, what the prevalence of a particular disease or something might be. A retrospective study collects data that is from and about the past. This is a particularly useful study design when you're looking for something that might be rare in terms of its prevalence. So if we're thinking about something like brain cancer, if I did a cross-sectional study and I just went through and looked at the whole population and asked people whether or not they had brain cancer and then tried to compare what the differences might be between people with brain cancer and those without, well, I'm going to end up in trouble because I'm not going to get a very large sample of people with brain cancer. It's just not a very common thing to have. So I would need a humongous cross-sectional study to even get a reasonable sample size of people with brain cancer. A retrospective study, what you can usually do is what we call like a case control study, where we take people who have the particular outcome we're interested in, say brain cancer. We find 100 people who fall into that situation or that particular disease category or whatever it might be, and we find 100 healthy controls, and then we go ahead and ask them questions about the past that might allow us to ascertain what could be associated with brain cancer. So that's a retrospective study. In a prospective study, we're looking for data in the future. So we start our study, we usually collect data, and then we wait until some future event happens. So this usually involves some sort of follow-up period. This is very similar to, and we'll just use it synonymously with, the idea of a longitudinal study. In a longitudinal study, you actually take data throughout this time. So as people move forward in time, you collect data at multiple time points. In fact, the group I used to work with at UCSD was a longitudinal study. We had a bunch of men in their 50s, happened to be twins. It was called the Vietnam Twin Study of Aging, Vietnam Era Twin Study of Aging. And we would have them come back every 5 years. And the goal was to try to figure out the genetics associated with how we age. So they can use the fact that fraternal twins have about 50% of the same DNA, and the fact that identical twins have 100% of the same DNA, to sort of figure out how much of things is due to genetics and how much is due to your environment. So, and they specifically cared about aging. So every 5 years they'd come back and the twins would have to go through a series of tests. They did like an MRI. They would do tests on their physical function. So like, how fast can you walk? I don't know how far they were supposed to walk, but we had like a little laser pointer thing set up. How quickly could they rise from a chair? Pulmonary functions, they had to like exhale or inhale into a machine to see how big a breath they could take. And then a bunch of mental tests as well, so like memory tests. So that was essentially a longitudinal study where every 5 years we were getting data points. And I stopped working there right after we finished the second year of data collection and before the third data collection would have started. But anyways, those are our 3 types. Just like when we talked about our biases, they're pretty easy to line up with what they are because they do sound like what they are. If I want a cross-section to know what the population looks like and taking my data at a single time and doing a cross-sectional study, if I want to look into the past, I'm doing something retrospective. And if I want to look forward into the future, I'm going to be doing a prospective study.